we should understand is dividing negative numbers is very similar to multiplication. So if you remember in the last video, if you have negative times another negative, this would make the overall number positive. So we can write this with variables to show or to represent other numbers. So say if this x is negative and this is also negative, and you're multiplying this right here, this sign, you'd get something that is xy positive. So two negatives multiplied, you get something positive. Say we had x and y, and you were multiplying them again, and only x is negative and y is positive. The overall would be a negative xy. So in this terms, without variables and numbers, you'd have a negative times a positive. This would equal negative. So again, two things that are different will give something negative. Two things that are similar will give something positive. So even if they're both positive, if x was positive and y was positive, you'd get xy positive. So similar to something positive being multiplied by something positive, you get something positive. And these rules hold for division. Let's look at some examples. So example 1, say we have 10 divided by a negative 5. Well, you already know what this would be. It would be a 2. Since we have a negative here and a positive here, same like multiplication, you would end up with a negative. You could also write this in horizontal form, like this, or vertical form, having the 10 on top and then negative 5 on the bottom. Similar, you can write it, do the regular division first, so this would be 2. Since this is positive and that's negative, you get a negative. So you have a negative 2 here. Let's go on to another example. In example 2, say we have a negative 6, and this is divided by 3. Go ahead and do the regular division, and you get 2, but since this is negative and that's positive, you get an overall negative. You can also write this as negative 6 on top and a positive 3 on bottom. Overall, you get the division first, you get 2, but since the negative 6 is on top and the 3 you have a positive on bottom, you get an overall negative. Example 3. Say we have a negative 4 and a negative 2. Well, do your regular division, this would equal 2, and now you have a negative and another negative that you're dividing. And so two things that are similar would give you something good, which is positive. So this would just stay positive. You could also write it the other way. Negative 4 divided by negative 2. And this will give you something positive. Example 4. Say we have something divided by a 0. So 15 divided by 0. Is that even possible? No. This cannot equal anything. It is not defined. Or does not exist. Okay? Even if you have a negative 15 divided by 0, you will not get any number. It is not defined. And 0 can't be negative, so you won't find anything like that. So anything divided by 0, you cannot define. Let's do example 5. Say we have 0 on top, a 0 divided by negative 3. Well, anything divided by 0 would be 0. So similar to 0 divided by negative 3. It does not matter if it's negative or positive, it will still equal 0. So anything 0 on the numerator would be 0. Now if you have 0 on the bottom like we had last example, it would not exist. So no zeros in the denominator. So example number 6. What happens when you have 1 if you divide by 1? So we'll take 1 divided by 5. What is this really saying? So how many times does 1 go into 5? Well, it would just be the same as saying something like this. And those two are very similar to each other. Now what if I multiplied this by 5 over 1, and then I multiplied it by 1 over 5? What would you do? You multiply the tops together and the bottoms together, and you would get something like this, 1. Why is that so? Well, let me show you. Well, if we see 1 over 5, and we flip it saying 5 over 1, and you multiply them, you should always get 1, because these are reciprocals of each other. When you multiply reciprocals of each other, you will always get 1. Reason being because 1 over 5 times 5 over 1. What you do is you multiply the top together and the bottom together. What you would get is 5 over 5, which is the same as saying 1. So 5 over 5 is 1 because we know anything that's over itself will give you 1. Okay, let's do an example of finding the reciprocal. What do we have? 7. What is the reciprocal of 7? Well, in all reality, if you want to write 7 as a fraction, you can also do this. 7 over 1. That's the same thing as 7. So, to find the reciprocal of this, you could say that 7 over 1 is the same as 7. So all you have to do is flip this. To flip it, you just put the 1 on top and the 7 on bottom. We'll show that this is the same as this when you flip it. So 7 is the reciprocal is 1/7. Let's do another reciprocal. Let's try to find the reciprocal of 17. Now, remember again, you're going to write 17 as 17 over 1. To find the reciprocal, you have to flip it, and you put the 1 on top and the 17 on bottom. And that is the reciprocal of 17, 1 over 7. Okay, to check to see if you're right, all you'd have to do is multiply by the original number and its reciprocal, and you should get 1. So 17, multiply 17 times 1, you would get 17. 17 times 1, you get 17. So this top portion is being multiplied by 1, and you get this. The 17 on the bottom is being multiplied by 1 also, and you get this. And this, anything by itself divided by itself is 1. Okay, let's do reciprocals with negative numbers. Say we have a negative 1/12. What would be the reciprocal? Well, you just flip it, put the 12 on top, and you get a negative 1 on the bottom. But we really don't need to write the negative 1 on the bottom. What you could do, this is equal to just 12. Don't forget you have a negative there. This negative here indicates that it's negative of the whole fraction. It doesn't matter if it's on top or bottom, it's still going to make it negative. So you'll end up getting a negative 12. So this right here is the reciprocal of negative 1/12. Okay, let's talk about 0. Does 0 have a reciprocal? Let's find out. So we put a 1 underneath it. Let's try to flip it. So 1 over 0. Oh, you can never do this. Never divide by a 0 in the denominator. It's okay if it's in the numerator, not in the denominator. You cannot do this. So we find out that 0 does not have a reciprocal. Let's talk about example 11. Does 1 have a reciprocal? So we'll find out. So let's do this. 1 over 1. If you rotate this, you'll still get 1 over 1. So does that mean it has a reciprocal? Yes, technically it does. It's 1. It's itself. So 1 is a very special case where its reciprocal is itself. Let's look at another example of 1. Say we have a negative 1. Negative 1, we put another 1 underneath. You flip it, you'd get 1 and negative 1. So this would equal negative 1 because you have a negative here and a positive here. So the overall would be negative, and so it confers right here. We say that the negative 1 is itself as its reciprocal. Now let's test to see if we multiply the two reciprocals together, what should we get? This is negative 1 and its reciprocal. If you multiply them together, you should get 1. So that test still holds. Let's move on to another example, example 12. Let's talk about doing reciprocals of multiplication. Say we have 1 times 2. If we flip this, we should get, don't forget to put the 1 underneath, we should get the 1 on top and 1 times 2. If we just do the multiplication first, we would get 2, and then we can flip it, and we get 1/2. You can have a multiplication starting off and do the reciprocal of it, then do the multiplication later, or you can do the multiplication first and then find the reciprocal to that. Let's talk about the standard form of division. So if you want to do a division, say we want to divide a negative 1/4 times a 1/2, which is also negative. Either one, top or bottom, can be negative. Let's put the bottom one negative. That just means the overall fraction is negative, same thing here. So what should we get? Should we get a positive number or negative number as our answer? So we have a negative here and a negative here. The overall answer should be positive. So let's just do the regular multiplication. 1 times 1, you get 1. 4 times 2, you should get 8. And since you have a negative times a negative, you should get a positive. So this answer would be 8. So how do we use this in division? We have a negative 1/2 divided by 4. What we would do is we would take the reciprocal of this and then multiply it. So this right here is the same thing as this right here, but we're changing the sign. Once we change that sign, we have to take the reciprocal of this 4 right here on the right, and we should end up getting the 1/8, and it's going to be negative. The standard form, if I wrote these in a variable sense without numbers, just representing them as letters, we would write this as A over B multiplied by B over A. And if I wanted to, I can always say that this will equal 1. So any number that's A and any number that's B would be flipped to make this B over A, and that being multiplied would equal 1. Except for if your denominator is 0. In any case, if it's here or here. So what if we have a negative A on here, negative A here? You should still get 1. Well, this concludes our lesson. If you do have any comments about the video, please put them down below. And also give us a like and subscribe to our channel. And thank you for watching. You can find all of our videos on mymathmanual.com. You can catch our next video or preview the previous lessons by clicking in this area here. This will preview the next lesson, and this gives you the previous lesson.